Coming up on This Week in Computer Hardware, Steam controller reviewed, Lenovo Yoga 900 hands-on, Surface Pro 4 update, Samsung's 950 Pro is stupid fast, WD buys SanDisk, and more. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 338, recorded October 22nd, 2015. Steam and Yoga and Pros, oh my.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Wealthfront. Wealthfront is a low-cost, automated investment service that is the most sophisticated way for you to invest your money. Whether you've got millions or you're just starting out, visit wealthfront.com/Twitch to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. That's wealthfront.com/Twitch. And by Whole Home. Whole Home is more than a smart thermostat. It's a home energy controller that helps you save money and displays your energy use in real time. For a 30% discount, visit wholehome.com/twit.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, most delightful, and yes, most useful information in the great big wide world of computing and hardware and stuff. I'm Patrick Norton, joined as always by Mr. Ryan Shrout, who looks
and stuff
like
is always important to add.
It's always important. Well, we occasionally, me probably more than you, but occasionally you do go off tangent, over the hill, as it were.
Like right before the show, where we talked about airbags and microwaves.
Is this a new YouTube trend? Question mark?
No, I don't know. There was a story on Jalopnik about it of people putting airbags in microwaves and recording video of it. I don't know.
I want to know
something you can only do once. I'll tell you that for sure.
Explode open? Well, it depends on the whether or not the
the
airbag
the microwaves don't survive the attack. Really, pretty much. So.
In case you aren't familiar with the technology inside of airbags, it's essentially the blowy uppy bits of a shotgun shell that's electrically triggered that inflates and expands the bag, which pushes you against your seat and occupies the space between you and the steering wheel, or the space between you and the windows, or with the side airbags, and they get really big. If you've ever seen, you've ever been trucking through the pick and pull looking for parts for your truck, and you look over and see somebody that had a bad day on the commute on 880, you'll notice that bag, even deflated, takes up a lot of space inside the car. So now I want to search for that on YouTube and see whether or not they blow out the door or blow out the case, or just so many ways to hurt yourself and other people with microwave ovens, even without putting people inside the microwave ovens.
Yes.
Big honking
for sure.
transformers. I digress. Interesting week this week. Man, not as crazy pants with the news as last week. Lenovo released the Yoga 900. I got hands-on. The Surface Pro 4 reviews have hit. You know what? Let's start with something a little bit lighter. I'm wondering if it's time to build a new Steam box, because you got hands-on with the Valve Steam controller and the Steam. Basically, you did a review of the Steam controller and the Steam Link over, like Steam Link. It seems like two simple words, and yet I'll mess them up every time.
Right.
I mean, it sounds like I've been thinking, like, gosh, November, it's going to be time to build a new Steam box. But how's the controller? Do you love the controller?
Well, I mean, so keep in mind, you don't have to use a Steam box to use the controller, right? You can use this on the standard Windows machine, and it will work on it'll work on any game. It can basically, when you connect it to your machine, it kind of emulates just a regular controller hooked up. It just has some additional functionality when you're using it with Steam. So, I mean, the controller is odd, right? I don't know. Had you ever gotten hands-on with any of the iterations of the Steam controller through its development cycle, really?
I have vague memories of some modest fondling at CES, and it looked nothing. Well, I mean, it had buttons and two places to stick your hands, but beyond that, I vaguely remember it being radically different from what it ended up.
I think you and I probably went to the same Steam Steam launch party at CES where they had some hands-on with it. The controller is very different now than it was then. It's much more of a traditional controller look and feel. Like they didn't have this thumbstick on there before. They didn't have like your traditional buttons. They had touch pads with different regions in them. It has transformed quite a bit. I think they basically realized that you needed to have some semblance of duplicity between this controller and an Xbox or a PlayStation controller in order to accommodate all those existing games that already built in controller support. But there's still a lot of unique features. Like the build of it is very different. It's hard to really tell on video, but the controller kind of goes down. Like there's a recess here, so it's a convex instead of concave, like from where your palms are to where your thumbs rest, and it's a different feel. You have these two touch pads on either side. This one has a cross pattern in it, and it kind of emulates a D-pad on a controller. And this one over here is more unique. It really emulates like a trackball feel, and it even has like a haptic feedback on it of kind of like the clicking of a trackball might have. And when you move around it, it's, you know, if you keep your finger on it and kind of press, it moves very slow, but you feel that the haptic feedback. If you like swipe it across, you can actually feel in the controller that like it carries momentum with it, right? It has like the ball continues to roll after your hand lets off. And that's kind of an interesting way to play a first-person shooter, right? So the original idea the original idea for the Steam controller was to make a controller that made games that traditionally use a mouse and keyboard easier to play from a couch, right? Easier to play with just a controller in your hand from a couch. Because this is when they were starting to roll out Steam Big Picture mode and really start to put the Steam Machine idea forward. And so this is kind of the key to that, is the ability to have a trackball-like functionality that allows you to, it's basically like using a touchpad on a laptop, but you use it with one thumb on this controller. And it works okay. It works pretty well. It takes a little bit of getting used to, for sure. It's very different than using two thumbsticks or using a keyboard and a mouse, obviously. They've also have, there's 3 button sets on the back for left and right. You've got this up here, which is more of your traditional like trigger, like button, I guess. And this is more of your trigger. It's kind of got a fairly long throw to it with a click at the end. And then down here on the back, you have these paddles that shift on either side, right? And they're interesting. They kind of are to be used by your pinky and ring fingers. It's a unique input style. For example, when you're driving a car and you're doing like paddle shifting, for example. The controller, it just feels odd in the hand. It's lighter than I expected it to be, I guess. But in the kind of parts that you hold in your palm are a little bit bigger than I expected them to be. The buttons make a lot of clicking sounds, and sometimes I would say too loud of clicking sounds. Like if you listen, those are the top buttons, those are the paddle buttons, and then the touchpad has kind of a very distinct springy click sound to it. And if you're wearing headphones or something like that, it's not a big deal. If you're playing with speakers up, it's not a big deal. But chances are that's going to be more noticeable than what you have on a current Xbox 360 or PS4 controller. But it works well. And what I need to do is I need to like kind of force myself to play games with this for a week or 2 weeks or something to really get a handle on it. But it's very different than anything else out there, and I have a feeling that's going to be an immediate off-putting thing for the majority of users that put it in their hand, especially considering like Microsoft just released their Elite controller today for the Xbox One. It's $150, but it's like a traditional controller with a lot of modularity and stuff to it. This is $49, so it's much more in line with the classic Xbox 360, Xbox One, or PS4 controller. And it will work with the Steam Link device. It'll work with Steam machines. It'll work with your normal PC, through Steam. It's just a matter of getting people to try it and really adopt it, right? This is not a device that I'm recommending to people go out and buy and, oh my God, it's going to revolutionize how you play PC games. That much is for sure. But I think it has the chance to do some interesting stuff, right? And I think the more games kind of build up for this, they kind of target this controller for their game styles and maybe adjust control schemes a little bit because of it, we might see some advantages from it.
Some advantages.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's hardly a glowing endorsement.
It's not, but I like to see other options out there because the controller hasn't changed basically since the Xbox 360 days, right? That's pretty much the standard controller, and then the Xbox One and PS4 are essentially that same thing. So I'm very interested to see other options that take into account other stuff, right? So like, real quick, again, one benefit is there was a game, FTL, that I had on Steam that was built, it had no controller support at all. It was only keyboard and mouse.
Giant space battles of doom and awesomeness.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun. So you can basically play that on your couch using this as a touchpad, as a mouse, and then using these two buttons as left and right mouse button. And you could absolutely 100% play the game that way, and it worked very well. And you could not do that with an Xbox 360 controller, for example, right? So there are some cases where that's a benefit, and there are other cases where it still needs to be proven that it's a benefit and not a liability for gamers.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I got to go hands-on with Lenovo's Yoga 900 Monday. Was it Monday morning, Tuesday morning, earlier this week? You guys have a great shot of the watch band hinge, which is now more... well, it's now matching most of the colors of the case, which is like silver gold and clementine orange, which I believe is what we're looking at right there. The hinge feels fantastic. It seems like they've made it stronger, tightened it up. And it's been interesting because we'll talk about the Surface Pro 4 in a second, but looking at the pricing differences between the Surface Pro 4 and the Yogas is really striking. You know, you could argue that these are very different machines, but, you know, you're talking about a 6th generation Core i7 and 8 gigabytes of RAM starting at about $1,200 for this. You know, good looking screen, nicely configured out, 2.8 pounds. Lenovo claims that it should deliver around 9 hours of battery life, which is a pretty healthy jump over last year's like Yoga Pro 3, which is at around was sitting at around 7.5 hours, depending on the battery test. You know, a couple of USB Type 3 ports. You know, a DC input that also does USB 2.0, an audio combo jack, an SD card reader. You know, which really kind of made me think, in your face, Apple. You can have a good-looking laptop and put ports on. I'm a little cranky about the whole.
No, it's fair. I mean, it's completely legitimate concern. Right.
Yeah, I don't feel like spending, you know, the better part of $100 or considerably more so that I can have the privilege of being able to use all of my external devices that I need to use. But again, I might be old fashioned that way. You know, so it's a classic Yoga, right? It's got the tent mode. It's got the presentation mode. You can use it in tablet mode. The keyboard's fantastic. It's a really nice feeling keyboard, which is pretty typical for Lenovo products. You know, and it looks like it's, you know, they were really thinking about power, which is a plus. And I bring that up because if we sort of take a you know, step right, the Surface Pro 4, which everybody's agreeing is the best Surface by a long shot, huge improvements in the keyboard, huge improvements in the touchpad on the Surface Pro 4, a good healthy improvement in performance. But when you look at the Surface Pro 4, you know, they're like, it starts at $899. Well, that's with a Core M processor and 4 gigabytes of RAM, right? Which is not the most useful configuration. Now, for $999, you bump up to an actual Core i5 processor, which I think is a big, important thing to think about. Yeah, it's been interesting. So, you know, the Yoga 900 starts at $1,199, but it's really nicely configured for that, right? 13-inch screen, Core i7 yeah, it is a Core i7 processor. It's funny, I'm like clicking through the Lenovo web page, and every time I click shop now, I get another page with lots and lots of pretty pictures and sales information. And I'm doing this because I had one of those weeks last week where every time I wrote something, like the price changed significantly on Amazon.
Right.
Like,
that's annoying.
Stop this right now. And by the way, if you want a Surface Pro 3, and I can't imagine why you would, the prices on those are dropping considerably. But, you know, looking at the configuration, like the joint feels really good. Yeah, $11.99 with a Core i7-6500U, Windows 10, the QHD 3200 by 1800 touchscreen, 8 gigabytes of RAM, and a 256 gigabyte SSD. So that's a pretty nice configuration. You know, Intel wireless AC, Bluetooth 4.0, blah 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 blah. And then you know, they're offering like 512 gigabyte hard drives and some processor improvements, and I think 16 gigabytes of RAM max. And when you go over to the Surface Pro and you start trying to order that, you know, I look at that, or I should say pre-order that, right? The Yoga 900 is available right now at the Lenovo store and at Best Buy.
Yep.
We're pre-ordering for, it looks like, yeah, October 26 shipping dates for the Surface Pro 4. That entry-level one, it's 128 gigabyte SSD, and it's a Core, oh, wait. Yeah, see, yesterday it's the Core i5 right now with 4 gigabytes of RAM. I would not buy 4 gigabytes of RAM to run Windows 10.
It seems on the low side for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at 16 gigabytes, 16 gigabytes, 16. Like every machine I have around me is running with 16 gigabytes of RAM right now. But if you want to bump up to 8 gigabytes of RAM, you also get a 256 gigabyte hard drive, and the price is $1,300. So that first step, maybe they sold out at the Core M ones, but they had an $899 version with a Core M processor yesterday. That appears to be gone. The Core i5 4 gigabyte version is $999. The one you actually want is $1299 with 8 gigabytes of RAM and that 256 gigabyte hard drive. You know, and it's if you want to customize, you know, you start to realize, much like Apple, Microsoft's making a really hefty skim on SSD and memory upgrades. You know, about twice what the market is for DRAM, and about twice what it costs for an SSD. It's also really frustrating because, you know, if you don't need a lot of storage, they don't care. You basically, if you want 8 gigabytes, you get a bigger SSD. If you want 16 gigabytes, you can have a 256 or a 512. But wow, and it looks like a lot of the 16 gigabyte models are out of stock. Email me when available. You can still pre-order like the Core i5 ones. You know, if you want a larger hard drive than 256 gigabytes, looks like you have to go to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and all of a sudden you're up in that $2,200. And by the time you get up to the 1 terabyte version, which you can't even pre-order, it's like $2,700.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Steep.
Core i5, 8 gigs, 256 gigabytes of memory is $1,299, which is not bad. It's right there, right there in the neighborhood of that Lenovo Yoga 900. I don't know. It's just been interesting. Look at there was like all of these reviewers like, yes, this can replace your laptop. I think Inantec was like, you know, this is the workhorse, you know, convertible tablet. This is it. This is awesome. But the coda on everything everybody said was, it's expensive. It's expensive. It's expensive. Especially if you want to get a whole bunch of RAM stuffed into that machine. Right. So
I will say on the Lenovo itself, on the Lenovo 900, it's interesting the decisions they made in the design. Right. If you remember back to the Yoga 3 Pro, it was Core M only. And it had a 50 watt-hour battery, I want to say. And for this one, the complaints for that one was like, look, you actually had to step back in performance. The Yoga 2 Pro was faster than Yoga 3 Pro, and battery life was about the same. So you didn't get any advantages to it. With the 900, they're like, okay, look, we get it. We're going to go back to a 15-watt SoC. So now you have the performance of a full 15-watt Skylake part. And they increased the battery size to 66 watt-hours, again, trying to get to that 9-hour number that you listed at the beginning. So in theory, they addressed the primary complaints that anybody had with the previous generation Yoga 3 Pro. So I'm very curious to get our hands on that. We should have one in relatively soon, I think, for review. Same with the Surface 4 and the Surface Book. So I'm very interested to see how all this kind of shakes out, because those are the ones that stand out to me right now.
As well they should.
Yeah.
And so many more laptops coming in November. In case we didn't make that abundantly clear last week.
Yeah.
I should ask you, before we take a moment to thank our first sponsor, what's going on with the NVIDIA betas? It seems like are you basically going to have to deal with GeForce Experience if you want to load the latest drivers?
So, yes. So, NVIDIA for a while has had this release program they call game ready drivers, which is whenever there's a new kind of major PC game release out on the market, they want to have a driver on their website available to download the day before or the day of that brings about their most recent changes, best performance possible for that game, hence the title Game Ready. And it's a good mindset to have because a lot of people are excited about new games, want to play them when they launch that night. And if you have to wait a week or 2 weeks or a month for a driver to come out to fix issues or improve performance, you may already be done with that game and it may be kind of a useless thing to have in there. So the Game Ready driver is a tremendous program that NVIDIA's had. However, what they announced that they were going to start doing is that the Game Ready drivers, kind of in between wickles, if you will only be released through GeForce Experience. They will not be posted on NVIDIA's NVIDIA.com or GeForce.com for like your standard traditional download avenues. And on top of that, you have to have a validated email address in GFE. You don't have to have an account or anything, but they have to like send you an email, click through a verification link, that type of thing, in order for you to download those Game Ready beta drivers. As far as I can tell, there's no functional need for this. Like there's no benefit to the consumer. NVIDIA pitches that the benefit to the consumer will be that they're building this mailing list. They're going to offer contests. They're going to give away prizes to people who are on that list because these are their most dedicated users, those people that are updating drivers the most frequently. And I'm sure they will do some of that stuff. NVIDIA does a pretty good job of engaging with the community and kind of making those things fun and engaging at the very least. However, it's obviously just a headache for people that don't want to. There's a subset of users that have never wanted to install GFE, GeForce Experience, and they will, in order to get the driver in the normal way, will have to install GFE to do so. And that's obviously one of the things that NVIDIA wants to happen. NVIDIA claims that, look, 90% of our drivers are downloaded through GFE already, so this isn't really going to be that big of a change for people. Alan commented last night, though, because there's no DRM in the driver, right? So if I download the driver through GFE, there's nothing that stops me from posting it on my website for people to download. And I think that will be something that happens like in forums and other websites. But Alan pointed out last night, is like, okay, well, that's the perfect avenue to get malware and spyware on people's computers, is to have them download a thing that is an exe that they know they're going to run and approve and say yes to at all of the appropriate locations. And that's like potential for a really bad news thing. Now, do I think that will be rampant? I don't really. But it's just one of those things. It must make sense for them for some future endeavor they have in mind. But right now, like when they told us this, I was like, all this is going to do is piss people off. Like, yeah, I know. We're just trying to make it the messaging as best we can around this. So we'll see how that changes. Once the first major title comes out, you've got Battlefront next month. Star Wars Battlefront will come out next month. I think the new Assassin's Creed game comes out this week as well. So I think we'll see we'll see the results very soon. Yeah, actually, Assassin's Creed comes out tomorrow. So we'll see if they have a driver for that, and then what we have to do. It's whatever. It's just one of those things. It's stupid, but they're going to do what they're going to do, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
It's stupid, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not stupid? Being able to retire. Being able to say to yourself, I would like to reach my financial goals, which is why, in part, this week in computer hardware, this episode is brought to you by Wealthfront. It's a low-cost automated investment service. You should be investing your money for the long term, for you, for the financial health of your family, and you probably wondered, how do I do this? Because Wall Street, it makes very little sense when you start to look at it, if you approach it with sort of a logical, structured kind of approach. trying to do it yourself the right way is complex. It's time consuming, which is why Wealthfront is here for you. Look, traditional advisors charge a big chunk of your investment, 1 to 3% what you got under management. Plus, there's fees all over the place for transaction and changes. Wealthfront makes it easy for anybody to access world-class long-term investment management. You can get started investing today at a minimum of $500. And, if you're young, start now, because small amounts become large amounts over time, right? You sign up for an account at wealthfront.com, takes a couple minutes. You go right to work monitoring your portfolios around the clock and taking action as soon as an opportunity arises. It doesn't matter if you're investing for retirement or a different long-term goal, like say you want to put together a down payment on a house. Wealthfront automatically rebalances your portfolio and reinvests your dividends, all commission-free. The software optimizes your investments for the best risk-adjusted return, net of taxes and fees. It's transparent. It's accessible, so you can view all your accounts in one place, whether they're personal, joint, or retirement. You can also see every trade that Wealthfront makes on your behalf in your dashboard, on your desktop, or with their mobile app. Sophisticated investment strategies like tax loss harvesting and direct indexing, which optimize your after-tax returns while simultaneously lowering your tax bill. How cool is that? With Wealthfront, you pay 1/4% a year. That's 25 basis points, zero commissions, no hidden fees. That's less than $5 a month to invest a $30,000 account. There are no additional charges for any of Wealthfront's services. And Wealthfront's, they're getting pretty big. They're managing over $2.6 billion in client assets. It's grown over 20 times in the past 2 years. Join Wealthfront and start investing your money the right way today. Do us a favor, visit wealthfront.com/Twitch to sign up and get your free personalized investment portfolio. You'll see the customized allocation they recommend for your profile. And just for Twit listeners, if you sign up to invest, Wealthfront will manage your first $15,000 entirely free of charge for life. Claim your offer today at wealthfront.com/Twitch. And hey, if you haven't started investing for your future, it's time to do it now. And one thing I got to say for the lawyers, for compliance purposes, I have to tell you that Wealthfront Incorporated is an SEC-registered investment advisor. Brokerage services are offered through Wealthfront Brokerage Corporation, member FINRA and SIPC. This is not a solicitation to buy or sell securities. Investing in securities involves risks, and there is the possibility of losing money. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Please visit wealthfront.com to read their full disclosure. We want to thank wealthfront.com for their support and sponsoring This Week in Computer Hardware this episode. And remember, that's wealthfront.com/Twitch. Pardon the sneeze. Oh my goodness. This shouldn't be a surprise because SanDisk has been trying to shop themselves. They've been on the market for over a year now. Pardon me for 1 second. But kind of out of the blue, it came together. So SanDisk, if you don't know, they make memory. Primarily they're primarily known for SD cards, USB cards. If you've been in Costco and you bought an SD card, it probably came from SanDisk. In fact, I can see 1, 2 USB cards, 1, 2, 3 devices with SanDisk SD cards inside of them, but they are merging. They're being bought, actually. Western Digital is buying SanDisk for $19 billion. And part of me was like, I get what Western Digital gets out of this, but I was like, what does SanDisk get out of this? And then I was reading some other articles, and it's amazing to realize that they're probably the 3rd largest manufacturer of the memories, which I did not realize. That
they might be beyond that. Like if you look at just raw flash output numbers, right now theirs gets packaged in a lot of different ways. But who do you think would be bigger than them?
The Micron Intel consortium, and I would assume Hynix, it turns out, is pretty huge, and Samsung.
Yeah, they make a lot of DRAM as well as NAND, or as well as flash. But yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. They're regardless, they're up there. First of all, that's 19 billion with a B, which is a huge amount. The market cap of Western Digital was only $20 billion, so it's a huge undertaking for them as a company. But it does kind of in one swoop, in like one motion, make Western Digital a a company that now offers basically every flash memory product, from consumer SD cards to the flash that goes into a phone or into a TV, to the SSDs that you buy on Newegg or Amazon. Like, they're in all of those markets already. SanDisk is, so they get that benefit immediately, which is pretty impressive. And it also kind of spells the end of any company that really just makes hard drives anymore. Right? If you think about it, you know, Toshiba, they make hard drives, but they bought OCZ, plus they've been making flash for a very long time. I mean,
Toshiba and SanDisk have been in a partnership for years, which apparently will not be impacted by purchase by Western Digital.
Oh,
well,
okay.
you know, according to the legal, you know, documents disclaimer.
Right.
You know, and it's interesting because it's a large enough, it's a huge acquisition, which means it's going to come under SEC, you know, or what I guess what they usually call in articles regulatory scrutiny.
Right.
Although if you're competing with like Intel, Micron, and Samsung, you're probably pretty safe for claims of what do you want to call it? You know, it's not like they're going to be destroying either one of those two anywhere in the near future. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's a big number. I would not have expected it to be that big.
It is, and like you said, SanDisk has kind of been shopping themselves for a while, but this will take a while before we kind of see what the results are of this acquisition. But hey, Western Digital sells SSDs again, so there's that.
Seems smart.
Yeah.
Given the way the entire industry is moving, and I should still be able to buy my favorite, you know, micro SD cards for the near and far future. So the modest parade of you know, it seems like every parade of motherboards will be so chill compared to the 130, 40 odd motherboards that showed up in like 3 weeks this spring. MSI Z170A X Power Gaming Titanium Edition motherboard review. Is there an advantage to this motherboard over the other high-end, sophisticated, delightful, high-end motherboards for the Z170?
So,
is that a cruel question? Is this one better?
No, it's an absolutely 100% fair question. So, it does support 4-way crossfire, but only 2-way SLI, which is a change from previous X-Power motherboards. Anything that had been branded X-Power before could support 4-way NVIDIA or AMD GPUs. So there's a change that way. But those were X99, X79 motherboards. Right. This is a Skylake board. I mean, the real differentiating factor here, to be completely honest with you, is the coloring and styling. That's where the Titanium Edition branding comes from. You have a ton of features on this board, right? You've got two M.2 ports, 8 SATA ports. You've got PCIe 3. I'm sorry, the M.2 ports support PCIe 3.0 by 4, up to 8 centimeters in length, right? So you have full speed and full capacity for that. They do support NVMe drives. There's a U.2 host adapter to convert an M.2 port into a U.2 port for those Intel SSD 750s that are in the kind of 2.5-inch-ish form factors. You've got USB 3.1 Gen 2, which supports up to 10 gigabits per second on the back. You've got 2 of those. And then you've got 7 USB 3.1 Gen 1, or whatever you want to call it, that support 5 gigabits per second, 4 on the back, 1 internal port, and 2 ports available through the front USB connector as well. 7.1 channel audio, all that good stuff. 1 gigabit networking connection. This is not, despite all the things I labeled off, this is not like one of those, this board has everything all of the time forever feature sets, right? It doesn't have wireless built into it. It only has 1 Ethernet connection. It only has, I think, 6 or 8 SATA ports as opposed to 10 or 12, right? So it's limited in some ways, but it's not really limited in terms of what the average consumer would use. What really, like I said, what really stands out is what it looks like. If you go to the second page, you're going to get some non-MSI produced photos, pictures that Maury took, and you get a better idea of what the board looks like in coloration. So the white of the heatsink covers is different than the white of the motherboard PCB itself, and you might even call it kind of like an off-white, almost to a light gray shade on the PCB, which, as Alan and I were discussing last night, kind of helps reflect if you have any colored LEDs, whether they be on the board or in your case or whatever. The gray, the light gray, is going to actually help reflect them accurately, more so than white would, because of the bouncing characteristics of LED light, right? But it looks good. It's very unique. I think the white kind of grayish PCB makes all of those black ICs stand out in an interesting fashion. If you are building a system with a window, I think this would get a lot of attention, in addition to having just all of the features that you would expect to see on a high-end board. It is, I think it's $199. No, I'm sorry. I think that's going to be $299. Make sure I get that one right. It's got all the overclocking capability you're going to want. It's got all the features that I think you need. Like I said, USB 3.1 is really the feature on this generation that I think people need to have in their systems. Thunderbolt 3 maybe, but very few boards really offer that still today. Yes, this is a $299 board on Amazon and Newegg. But it did get a gold award from Maury. He did like it. Stock performance, the aesthetics, the layout and spacing, placement of all the components. Yeah. So Intel gigabit network as opposed to some kind of generic gigabit now. And then the dual M.2 ports, which will be more useful as we get further into this episode and we start to talk about another released M.2 SSD, for example. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. There's a M.2 SSD somewhere. Oh, it's in my bag over there. Otherwise, I'd grab it. Well, we talked about on Tech Thing last week, M.2 enclosures. I'm still kind of obsessing over M.2 and whether I really need it on my motherboard or not. But that's a question to be asked, answered, resolved, figured out later on.
We will do that.
Oh, my goodness. Next 5X review. Pretty much exactly what we expected. There's a nice review up on Engadget.com. Nicole Lee did this one. It's a nice screen. It's pretty fast. Really needs a micro SD card slot.
Yeah.
You know, the price is great, $349. You know, it's there's the Nexus 6P, right, which we talked about is going to be starting at $500. Nexus, excuse me, the Nexus 5X, pardon me, with the 5.2-inch screen, it starts at $379. It was the previous Nexus 5 that started at $349, but it's like $379 with 16 gigabytes of RAM, which I think is too small. You know, Nicole says she found it far better than she anticipated, which is harsh but fair. Battery life wasn't great. No micro SD card slot, which for me is now a deal killer. Not having a micro SD card slot, especially when you can get the performance of something like a Motorola G for $200 with a micro SD card slot. But Android 6.0, she said, is a fantastic upgrade. It works with Google's Fi network, which is probably a little more expensive than the least expensive T-Mobile programs, but a good deal for a lot of people. And she says the fingerprint sensor is quick and accurate. So
it's only available in up to 32 gigs of storage as well. So they don't even offer, they don't offer a 64 option either.
No.
Yeah, that's kind of disappointing.
It's Google. They want you to store everything on the interwebs because that's better than having it locally. But you know, I can drive. You know, I'm in the middle of a major urban metropolis across the bay from an even larger urban metropolis, and I can drive 5 or 10 miles and be in a no coverage zone. So local storage is kind of important to me. But
I think, you know, at $379, that's what the MSRP actually was. I think we're getting to the point where that price range is really where phones need to be launched at now, right? The $399 kind of top. You know, as more carriers kind of remove the idea of subsidies and we get into these monthly plans, which at least in some capacity expose the true price of a phone a little bit more. For example, my wife, she's still on an iPhone 5S. She wanted to upgrade to the 6S. We're not at an upgrade point in that plan. It's like, okay, well, it's going to be $799 for you to get the phone that you want with the capacity you need. And she's like, $800? Who pays $800 for a phone? I was like, well, pretty much everybody.
You did.
Almost everybody. Yeah. Yeah. You just don't really know it. And the benefits of these phones, and I think the 6P is maybe, I think that's what, $599, so it's really not kind of in the same ballpark. But this is what should be popular, and this is what I think companies should be targeting specifically, both with, you know, improved performance where you can, improve battery life now, and make that $399 phone the one that matters. Because I think that's how, as people realize what they're paying, we'll start to say, you know, I can get pretty close for half the price. That sounds pretty awesome to me.
It's funny how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's crazy when, especially when you look at the Moto G, which is, you know, water resistant to like a meter, 13 megapixel camera, decent 5-inch display with Gorilla Glass, you know, micro SD card. You know, unfortunately, they cheaped out on that, right? A 32 gigabyte capacity on the micro SD card, but it's still a lot more than no micro SD card. It's really interesting to watch, and I think part of what we're going to see over the next year or two is a lot of people clock out on their current you know, commitment, their 2-year contract. I think we're going to see a lot of people going, wait a minute, what is this? I just want another 2-year contract. But it's going to be interesting, you know, if you think about how good a phone is, the Moto G is for $180, and what's going on with the 5X for $379, it makes me really excited to see what kind of phones we're going to have in that $200 to $300 price range a year from now.
Right.
Because they're already pretty good, and I think they're just going to keep getting better. Yeah. I don't ever.
I really want to try
your contract again.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yes, I 100% agree. And it seems like the carriers are actually becoming responsive to that request, right? Like, I'm going to bring a phone, and like Verizon for the first time is kind of letting you bring phones in. It's things are starting to change, maybe not fast enough. But I really do want to try out this 5X and this 6P because that whole thing where I'm still using an iPhone 6S, right? Like this is still my primary phone. I've been very happy with it. I'm anticipating keeping it and continuing to use it as my primary phone. But I would like to do is get one of probably maybe go with the 6P or maybe the 5X, something that is considered the flagship Android, and try to go back and see how that experience is. Like, I think that might be the most jarring of the changes going backwards from iOS to Android. Not backwards, but just going back to what I had before. So maybe in the 60 to 90 day time frame, I'll pick up one of those 6Ps and go through that whole experiment too. But we'll see. Should be fun.
We wait with bated breath. One last thing before we thank another sponsor. Nice write-up on ours. TWiCH Android 6.0 re-implements mandatory storage encryption for new devices as long as you meet the minimum speed requirements. That is, Andrew Cunningham wrote this up for Ars Technica. And it's, you know, it's interesting because right now Apple's basically saying, like, you know, if you have this operating system in this phone and above, we can't access it. It's locked out. It's locked down. And now Google has, quote, published an updated version of the Android compatibility definition document, which is a fascinating read if you want to download that PDF for Android 6.0. And mandatory encryption is back with Marshmallow. And if they have AES crypto performance above 50 MIB per second. So, and the MIB I found a little confusing.
It's like megabits. I don't
got it.
I don't really.
It's a cryptography thing. I wouldn't understand.
I don't appreciate them confusing me with different things like that. But yes, well, it's a real thing. When I first saw it for years, I thought, oh, somebody typoed that pretty bad. I mean, it's kind of equivalent to megabytes, more or less. 1 megabyte is equivalent to 1.04 megabytes.
Right.
Google tells me that. I don't know.
Google tells me that. Google knows all and sees all.
Yes,
in any case, older version of tablets that had older tablets and phones that had older versions of Android being launched don't necessarily have to have it. And if they don't hit the crypto performance requirements, they don't have to have it. That said, most of the newer phones, I think, are going to hit a lot of those requirements. Andrew points out on Ars Technica, this is a step forward, though it includes a few too many loopholes for our liking and does nothing to protect users of most of the Android phones being sold and used today. Which, you know, is kind of like the whole getting your operating system updated under Android. You are a hostage to your carrier, which is really as irritating as that is, you know, when your carrier is subsidizing your phone, i.e. hiding the charges over 2 years of bills, is much more irritating when you've paid for your device in full and the manufacturer tells you that problem's fixed, but you have to wait until your carrier graciously allows you to download an update, assuming they ever do that. Not that I'm cranky. Oh my goodness. Whole Home. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Whole Home. It's powered by Energate. They provide, I've had a chance to talk to the Whole Home people. I actually have one that has arrived, and I'm in the process of testing it in my house. It's essentially they make utility grade, i.e. the stuff that utilities buy to put on your house, interactive energy management solutions that are secure and reliable. And until recently, you could only get a hold of this technology from Energate if you were a utility, i.e. you were a utility, a big organization that works around the state providing energy. So Whole Home is an energy controller with a built-in teaching thermostat, right? We've heard about those, an energy display. Connects to your Wi-Fi using your smartphone, replaces your existing thermostat. But what's kind of awesome is it connects to your Zigbee smart meter. So if you have a smart meter, a smart electrical meter, it'll actually track real-time electricity usage. It's easy to install. It's basically like, you know, if you can build a PC, you can replace a thermostat. If you can replace a thermostat, you basically know exactly how to install Whole Home. All you got to do is answer some simple questions. Once the hardware is installed, what time do you get up on a typical day? And then the setup wizard puts you in control without ever having to look at the manual. Works with 95% of all heat pumps and conventional heating and cooling systems. They have a really simple tool on the Whole Home website that allows you to, like, you know, look at the wires in the back of your thermostat and figure out whether or not you're going to need any special help to get the Whole Home connected. But for 95% of us here in the United States, that's not going to be an issue. As soon as you install Whole Home, it's going to start minimizing your heating and cooling energy costs and show you how much you're saving in both dollars and kilowatt hours. The energy screen shows your current electricity consumption, which is fascinating when you fire up an electric dryer, and spending in dollars per hour, which is slightly less fascinating and more terrifying. Quote, just like a car speedometer shows miles per hour, Whole Home shows energy dollars per hour. It's like an energy speedometer for your home. So it'll track the snot out of your electrical usage. The LEDs on the front respond to price changes. So, you know, it'll tell you when the electricity gets expensive. It's going to say, hey, don't, you know, it's a reminder so that you don't run the laundry or do your ironing or run the dishwasher, the stuff that where you generate heat with electricity and it gets really expensive. It's going to be so awesome in a couple of years when you're looking at your electrical bill and thinking to yourself, why does my child need 3 sets of clothing every day, Ryan? Honey, we're only doing laundry after 10 o'clock or whatever your particular regional utilities structured pricing tiering. My local utility is based on punishing you if you use energy. The Whole Home's pretty cool. It helps you know what's going on with your electrical consumption. It helps you control the power or the energy consumption of your heating system, which is usually a lot of money if you live in most of the United States. Whole Home is more than a smart thermostat. You can save energy and money and see your energy use in real time with Whole Home. Go to wholehome.com/twit to get your code and receive an exclusive 30% limited time discount. That's HOLHOM.com/twit. 30% off. We want to thank Whole Home for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware and for helping us bring the show to you. Wholehome.com/twit. Get 30% off and help support the show. I like it. Samsung 950 Pro.
Yep, that's a thing.
So these are PCI Express SSD cards. It looks like I'm looking at is that an M-slotted M.2 card using
These are
quad?
M.2 SSDs.
Okay.
So you were talking about having M.2 SSDs nearby. Here you go. Here's 2 of them. We have the 950 Pro and the 256 and the 512 gig capacity. This is so it's interesting, right? So if you think back to Samsung's consumer line of products, you had the 840 recently, and you had the 850, and now you have the 950. But the most dramatic change is that these are not available in 2.5-inch form factors. These are M.2 form factors only, at least for now. That's from what we're told. M.2 only, so you can't buy this with a SATA plug. They're PCI Express by 4 connections, PCIe 3.0 by 4 connections, so a lot of speed availability. And then they're NVMe as well, so they're non-volatile memory express protocol is what they're using versus AHCI. So you get a lot of efficiency improvements, less CPU utilization for the throughput that you get, and they're incredibly impressive. If you look through the pictures in Alan's review, you'll see, but like there's only chips on one side of the PCB, right? The other side is completely blank, which is interesting. They're able to get 512 gigs released today. Then they promise to have a 1 terabyte version early next year of this drive. So the performance is outstanding. The higher capacity model hit over 2.5 gigabytes per second. The 256 gig model got over 2 gigabytes per second in read speed. And then I believe the write speeds were 1.5 and 1.0 gigabytes per second. So a huge amount of performance in this tiny, tiny little drive. It uses less than half the power of the Intel SSD 750 series parts, which are the full PCI Express plug-in, and plug into a PCI Express slot SSDs. Those were the first NVMe products that we really had for a consumer standpoint, and this is the second. Now, the problem is it is NVMe and it's in this form factor, right? So if you have a Z87 motherboard, you have an older system of some kind that doesn't support NVMe booting, then you can, even if you have an M.2 slot, you can't boot off of this, right? Or maybe you have an older system that just doesn't have an M.2 slot. You're not going to be able to install one of these. The solution is to get an adapter card, like a riser card, that basically is it's a PCI Express slot add-in card. It's basically just a PCB on it that has an adapter to let you plug in an M.2 part, and thus you're converting it from a PCI Express interface that looks like this to a PCI Express interface that looks like one on a video card, one that you actually are familiar with. And you can pick those up on Amazon or eBay or whatever. I think Newegg sells them too now for anywhere from $10 to $20. So they're not super expensive, but it is an added cost if you don't have an M.2 port on your motherboard or your small form factor PC or your laptop, right? But if you look at most of the Z170 motherboards that have come out for Skylake, a lot of the X99 motherboards that came out for Haswell E have support for M.2 on them. I mean, hell, there's some Gigabyte boards that have 3 M.2 slots, right? So they're kind of planning ahead for this eventuality as well. But that doesn't mean it's not inconvenient today. It wouldn't surprise me. This is the 950 Pro. It wouldn't surprise me if they come out with a 950 Evo or something, whatever they call it, that maybe would be in this form factor as well as 2.5-inch standard SATA. It wouldn't surprise me if they do that. But it wouldn't shock me if they don't either, I guess.
There's logic
Samsung...
there.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends. Is the company willing to jump all in on the M.2 form factor yet?
Yeah.
I think it may be a little bit too early to do that for the consumer side. For the OEMs, it's fine, right? OEMs plan their system around an M.2 form factor component, then boom, you're done and you're off to the races. I would go check out Alan's review of this of these products because they're actually pretty interesting. And he's starting a new testing methodology that we're rolling out that kind of does to storage testing and latency testing what we did to frame time testing on the GPU side, where we take into account outliers and how they affect the overall performance and experience of these things. So like the second to last page is something called latency distribution and latency percentile, which basically means we look at all of the results instead of averaging them together and show you those results in kind of these buckets, right? And these buckets give you a much more granular look at how performance behaves. Now, there's a lot of data and information on the graph, so you're definitely going to have to read the text along with each graph to understand what they mean. But once you have a grasp of what you're looking at, it's very easy to look at one of those images and kind of get an idea of what you're looking at and what the results are. And also in that way, we can actually compare hard drives to NVMe PCIe SSDs and actually get a useful comparison point that you can't really get by looking at, you know, latencies in an average way, I guess. So check that out if you would. If you look at pricing, they're reasonable. They're not great, but they're pretty good, especially considering that they are. Yeah,
I was going to say they're
29 or something like that, right?
We're having a Skype failure.
Yeah, we did.
The Skype latency is killing us. It's pre-ordering for October 29th. It's $350 for 512 gigabytes. 256 gigabyte drives are selling for $200. And it's interesting because the 850 Evo M.2 drive I have here is SATA based. You know, and you look at that and it's like, oh, you know, it's 250 gigabytes, like 500 gigabytes is $174. 250 gigabytes is $88. So you're looking at, like, on one hand, it's like, oh, this is a ridiculous premium. I'm playing like twice as much. But to put that into context, you know, when you look at those Samsung SSD 950 Pro specs, right? It's, you know, it's PCI 3.0 by 4, which is up 32 gigabits per second, and an 850 Evo M.2 running SATA is maxing out at 6 gigabits per second. And in case you're not familiar with, 32 gigabits per second, that's a theoretical maximum for 4 lanes of PCI Express 3.0. That's 4,000 megabytes per second. And these 950 Pros are already hitting upwards of 2,000 megabytes per second. So that's pretty freaking awesome if you are looking for all the performance.
And and consider that the next fastest SSD, the Intel SSD 750 series, is the 400 gig model of that add-in card is over $1 a gig, whereas the 512 gigabyte version of this is 68 cents per gig. So that's a significant reduction in cost per gig. And you're getting something that's as fast, probably a little bit faster in most cases, than that Intel drive. And it's in this tiny form factor, which might be a hassle or it might be a convenience for you, depending on your system. It uses less than half the power. It's a very impressive technological feat for Samsung to have done. And also, it's just really fast. It's just really, really, really fast.
Do you like things that are really, really fast?
It's okay. I'm okay with that. Yeah.
Oh man, I heard that voice. Really, really fast.
Yeah. And like if you go with the Intel sells an 800 gig version of the Intel 750 series, and that's like 95 cents per gig, right? So you're looking at a third less price per gig on this drive. So it is expensive compared to some reasonable performance, high performance SSDs that are SATA based. But if you compare it to PCIe drives and NVMe PCIe drives in particular, it's actually a strong performance per dollar advantage over the competition. So they should be commended for that. They did a good job.
Yay. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny that like the 950 Pros are selling for less than the current OEM Samsung NVMe M.2 drives.
Yep.
I just find that fascinating. So I'm looking on PCPro.com and I see you mentioning like your pick for the week in the podcast was the quote stock plop SSD enclosure.
Yeah, look, I don't know how to explain the
Swedish
name
things
for
that
you.
don't appeal, like that don't translate well. Yeah, Stockenpluffen is like the highest standard of Möbelkrafte that you're familiar with from. I mean,
yeah, I don't really know what the issue is in terms of the language barrier. The product barrier though is very simple. This is as simple as you can get USB 3.0 drive enclosure for 2.5-inch drives. It only supports 7mm drives, so the thinner ones, you can't get the thicker 9mm drives in here. But this is what it is, right? Like it's a fairly heavy, thick aluminum device that has a USB 3.0 micro USB connection on one side and then like an activity and power light on this side. It ships with a cable. In the inside, you can't tell on the shot, but there's a SATA connector in there, and that's pretty much it. It is UASP compatible, meaning it supports the multi-Q depth version of the USB 3.0 interface. And you take an SSD like this, we've got a Corsair Neutron Series XT, and you shove it in, and that's it. You're done, right?
How much are they?
$50. No, wait, hold on. What did this say? 35, something like that. Yeah, like $35.
Twice what you'd pay from a obscure brand that is only seen on Amazon and involves 4 screws. True. And significantly, I got to say, significantly more stylish.
They have a plain aluminum one. They have one that looks like this on both sides. They have a bamboo one. They have the wood one. And then they have a carbon fiber one as well. And I asked for the carbon fiber one, of course. Of course you would. But that one was on a couple of month delay, they said. So
I'd go for the wood one, man.
I suffered and went with the wood one. Yeah, I mean, it's nice. And the thing about it is,
went with the wood one.
I know. The thing about it is it's super simple. There's nothing to break. We had another UASP drive enclosure that had a plastic hinge on it that snapped literally 3 weeks into use. Your drive feels very protected in this. Like I would have no issues just like literally tossing this in a backpack or a suitcase or something like that and moving on with my life. Nothing's going to break or fall apart in it. As long as you don't leave your USB cable connected to that, connector here, you don't leave it attached to the device. There's like no issues at all with security on this. So cool. It's just a neat little thing. Like if you have SSDs, maybe you're upgrading to a 950 Pro and now you're going to have a 256 gig SSD that you don't know what you're going to do with. You buy one of these and now you have external storage to move things between PCs or share stuff with friends or do whatever it is you're going to do. So there you go. Indeed.
I like it. It's stylish. And if you click around on the webpage, you might actually find the English translation available for sale on Amazon in Germany and UK, but not yet in the United States.
It's on its way. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent it to me, I'm sure.
One would hope. I mean, not that people shouldn't send you things just because you're awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Speaking of awesome, I know one person in the world, I think, has actually had the Magic Leap experience. I bring this up, right, because we've been, Microsoft's, dev kits are out for their augmented reality. We've got Oculus Rift updates. We've got Valve updates, HTC, Samsung, Google Cardboard, and yesterday the news comes up that Magic Leap, which is this huge investment story, but nobody's actually, there's crazy videos on their websites that nobody can actually verify whether it looks like that in real life or not. But they're apparently looking at a $1 billion funding round, like a year after they had a $500 million fund, literally almost a year to the day after they did a $542 million funding round that involved a lot of money from Google. So this company's been going since like 2011. A fellow by the name of Ronnie Abovitz is the CEO. I'm really curious. Proprietary wearable technology produces cinematic reality is the quote from the South Florida.
That's a lot of words, Patrick. That's a lot of words.
Hey, man. Yeah, but it's, right. I'm just saying, and $1 billion is a lot of money for a company that really hasn't shown a lot of people what it has. Obviously, everyone who's seen it really likes it because they cut giant checks.
All right, so that's my goal. I got to find something that I can show people that they really like.
Yeah, and
then maybe produce it.
Yeah,
get there.
Well, I don't know. It's funny. Like they did a video earlier this year. There was like people playing a first-person shooter game in a cubicle farm. But apparently they're building a campus where they're actually going to develop a pilot of their technology. So I
okay,
find out.
I'll ride. I'll go along for the ride on this for another year. So.
We'll someday maybe actually see it. Oh my goodness! Next week, Windows 10 update. Paul Thurrott says is going to be coming probably the first week of November, so that'll be exciting. And iOS 9.1, which came out I think this morning, has already shut down the Pengu hacking team's jailbreak. So if you're looking forward to jailbreaking OS 9, you're going to wait a little longer because the crack has been patched. So if you want to use the Pangu hacking team's jailbreak, don't upgrade to 9.1 because apparently they shut a couple of the exploits that were used by the Pangu hacking team.
Yeah, but if you don't update, you don't get the sweet new emojis.
Yeah. You're a big emoji guy. You're
Sorry.
much more. No. I just want to say that you're a much bigger emoji enthusiast than I am. A lot of people wouldn't think it because I mean, people look at me and think, yeah, yeah, he's probably into emojis, but actually Ryan is the emoji enthusiast in this pairing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh man, I'm up to my eyeballs in Linux. In a way I haven't been in a long time, looking at Elementary OS, which is this really beautiful sort of Ubuntu, derivative. And at the same time, I'm also looking at JDS Labs, the Element, which is perhaps the coolest looking headphone, digital analog converter, and amplifier I've ever had my grubby little paws on, which has also led me to start playing around with magnetic planar headphones, which we'll talk about probably a little closer to November. Because, yeah, I bought, like, my wife figures out that I bought 2 sets of magnetic planar headphones in the last 5 days. There will be words.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that because I just got the shipping notifications for all this Microsoft Surface 4 and Surface Book and all these accessories as well. I was like, ooh, like all those charges show up on my Apple Pay thing now. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I did buy those, didn't I? Nobody sent me that. I had to buy those. Oh Christ, that's gonna okay.
It's a business expense, dear.
Let's get through those reviews as quick as we can get them through.
It's a good point.
Oh man.
No, it only becomes oh man if you decide to keep them because they're that freaking awesome. Apple TV is expected in mid-November. We don't have any confirmation on the actual ship date. You can't buy one yet. Roku 4 at the end of this month. We'll have a review on that on Tech Thing as soon as we get our pause on it. Pause seems to be the conversation of the week. And possibly my favorite segment on Tech Thing, the Tech Thing that's going up this afternoon, is talking about what happens when somebody starts using your Gmail account as their spam account. Yeah, there's pretty much only one solution, and you're not going to like it if you like your Gmail address. Man, the month of notebooks coming up, more Skylake processors starting to flood in, and I want a Samsung 950 Pro, and I don't really need one, so we'll deal with that later on.
That's good. That means we accomplished our goal for the day. Patrick lusts after hardware he doesn't need. Okay. Success.
Well, I'm thinking about getting a 970, and it's like, what games am I playing that they don't look good enough on my 750 Ti or my 760? Oh, wait. Well, what about I could get a 950? But if I'm going to get a 950,
if you think about all the new games you could play that you haven't tried yet, if you got a 970.
On the upside, as far as we know, there's no major GPU announcements coming between now and Christmas, so we got that going for us. Or I got that going for me. You've got a office full of GPUs. I
have plenty of stuff to worry about. Yeah, that's bottom of the list right now.
Oh my goodness, diapers. You've got diapers to worry about.
That's true. That's 100% the case.
And technology can improve diapers. And on that cheerful note, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.